All right. All right. And welcome to the show. I am super excited about having you here because we met like, what was it, three years ago in
Yeah, yeah,
Experts Academy, I think.
yeah.
It's so funny. And then you feel like you know somebody because you've watched their journey over the years on social media. It's so great that we have technology to these days and ages that we can see this stuff and actually experience it when you live across the pond from us, right?
Yeah.
I love it. So tell me a little bit about, like, tell my audience, how did you get into what you're doing, and tell us, like, what was your journey?
hmm So it's interesting that we met at Experts Academy because that was a real sort of seminal moment for me, and I'll give you a little bit of background as to why that was the case. So the previous year in 2015, I just finished at university, college, as you'd say over in the States. And I'd just finished my final exams. It was May. I was about to graduate for a degree in psychology, and I was ready to go on and take on the world. I had a business plan with one of my course mates, and we were going to make millions of dollars doing online teaching and coaching and all this sort of stuff. I was going to go and use this psychology degree, and I was going to change people's lives. And like many 22-year-olds, I was enthusiastic and a little bit cocky, if I'm honest. And so here I am. I've finished my final exams. I remember the day, it was the 27th of May. It was a Wednesday. And I go out in the morning and I run some chores and I do some shopping. And I come back into my apartment that I'm living in at the time. And I open the door, and there before me on the floor is an envelope. So I bend down and I pick up the envelope. And as I look at the writing, I see the very distinct, scribbly, scrawly, scratchy handwriting of my dad. And bearing in mind what's just happened, I've just finished my final ever exams the previous week. I know what's in this envelope. It's going to be a congratulations card, and if I'm lucky, maybe even a little bit of spending money as a reward for doing so well in my studies. So I go into my bedroom and I rip open the flap, and out of the envelope I pull not a card, but a letter. And so I open up this letter, and in the letter, Dad tells me the news. Previous Christmas, Dad had gone into hospital for some routine scans on his heart. And the doctors did the scans, and they said, oh, well, Mr. McCrae, there's nothing wrong with your heart. There's a little bit of age-related decay, but otherwise fit, healthy, fine. The problem's not in your heart. It's in your lungs and liver. Huge cancerous growths. They said, based on the spread and severity of these tumors, you've got stage 4 cancer. This is a terminal diagnosis. We estimate you've got about 6 to 8 months to live. So Dad hears this news, and he makes a decision at this point not to tell me. I'm just away to go into my final semester of university. I've got my final year dissertation, all my last bits of coursework, these final exams to do. And he doesn't want that hanging over my head, weighing me down, distracting me. So he keeps it secret. And he keeps it secret beautifully. And so for months and months, I'm oblivious, I'm unaware. And then here I am, sitting in my bedroom, reading this letter, and Dad breaks the secret. And as the secret's broken, I feel my heart breaking along with it. Because here I am, and I'm so cocky and enthusiastic about what I'm going to do and the difference I'm going to make and the money that I'm going to make. And I'm going to be doing it without my dad. He's not going to be there to share the journey with me, to celebrate, to support me. And at this point, Dad has just hit the 6-month mark, and he could go at any time. Now, for anyone who's listening who has been with a loved one who has had a similar illness, quite often it can appear there's actually very little wrong. There's very few external symptoms. And this was certainly the case for Dad. He was still looking after himself. He was cooking, he was cleaning, he was driving to all intents and purposes, apart from extreme weight loss, he looked fine and functioning. And so we had some time at this point to get some closure and do some father-son stuff. And I interviewed him about his life, and I wrote him a gratitude letter, and I started to build some of the closure that I ultimately wanted to get. But again, for those who are listening who've been in a similar situation, you'll know that everything can look fine for a while and then a scale shift. And this is what happened with Dad towards the end of June. His health deteriorated rapidly. In the end, he was too ill to travel to my graduation. He was taken into hospital. He spent a couple of weeks on pain relief, essentially. And the doctor said, look, there's nothing more we can do for you here. So he was moved from hospital into hospice. And it was there on Friday, the 24th of July in 2015 that my dad passed away. And I was there with him on that final day. I actually arrived to his hospice room 60 minutes before he passed. I had the opportunity to speak to Dad, to say what I wanted to say to him, to ultimately say goodbye. And I got to be with him there in the final moments. And I'll be forever grateful for that opportunity. And I remember after Dad had just passed and the nurse had come in, I'm sitting there and I'm holding Dad's hand. And I look across at Dad's lying there in his deathbed. And in that moment, I realize one day that's going to be me. One day it's going to be all of us, right? All of us one day are going to be lying there on that final day. And when we're there, we're going to look back on our lives and we're going to evaluate our lives, aren't we? We're going to say, well, was the time that I spent on earth worth it? Did I live the life that I wanted to live? Was I the person I wanted to be? Did I do the things I wanted to do? Did my life have any impact and meaning for other people? And so as I'm sitting there, even though it's not me in the deathbed that day, I start asking myself the same questions. And I keep on coming up against the same answer. No, I'm not happy with the person I'm being. I'm not happy with the things I'm doing. I'd been on earth for 22 years and I don't feel I'd made any impact to anyone or made a difference to anyone's lives. And so as I'm coming up against these difficult answers, I also recognize I've got a choice. Just because I've been living my life this way up until this point, I don't have to keep living my life like that. I don't have to keep on living a life that I'm not happy with. I can change that. I recognize that sitting there in that room, I've just come to the end of a chapter. The chapter of my education, the chapter with my dad in it. And as soon as I leave that room, there's blank pages waiting. A new chapter is about to be written, and I can choose what that chapter looks like. If I'm not being the person I want to be, doing the things I want to do, making the impact that I want to make, I can start changing those things. And so as I'm sitting there in that room, I make a decision and a promise. I make a decision that I'm going to make those changes. And I make a promise, not just to myself, but to my dad. I make a promise that I'm going to go and make the best of the rest of my life, that I'm going to take all that time and attention and energy that he invested in me as a parent, and I'm going to make something of that. Because he was always trying to teach me how to be a good person and how to do the right thing in life. I owed it to him and his parenthood to go out there and make that happen, to be the person, live the life that he hoped that I could be and that I could live. And so I stand up, I take one last look at Dad. I walk out of that room and I start writing that new chapter. And that was the catalyst that started to kick everything into play for me. And one of those things ultimately ended up being going to Experts Academy 9 months later and learning a lot of things and getting a lot of clarity. And we can talk about that a little bit more as this interview goes on.
I love it. And, I think people who have lost a parent have such, or even someone that's very close to them, we have such a different view on life. Because so when I was 10, my dad passed. It was a car accident, so it was instant. So I never got to say goodbye. Mm-hmm. And it rocked my world, changed everything for who I am today. At 15, my mom came to school and told me that she was sentenced to a year to live because she had malignant melanoma and there's no cure. And I realized that it's not like you said earlier, I am like cocky, I'm ready to conquer the world. It's about making money and impacting millions and all this stuff, right? It's all about this. What can I get from the world? And when you actually have something like this really affect you, you realize how life is short.
Yeah.
Completely. Because I mean, how old were you at the time? 22?
22. Yeah.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden, every moment is so much more precious. Like, I don't do what I do so that I can make money and my family has a bigger house and bigger cars or whatever. What I do it for is experiences. We go and do fun things. We're renting an RV this next week and we're going to go camping for a couple days, only because my kids never camped in an RV. So I'm going to go rent one. But normally I'm like, I'll throw a tent out and all that stuff. But this is another experience for them, right? And
Yeah.
I think that we just have such an affinity for like really like cultivating those moments in our lives and really taking a breath and going, oh, I'm so grateful for this moment. Where other people, it
Yeah.
just fleets by and they don't even realize it. And then they're like, you look back, you're like, what have you done? You know, you look busy, but what have you completed and who have you affected and how have you impacted people? And I think that that is a great gift that we're given, that it's hard to see in the moments. You know, I'm like, wait a minute, I have to graduate without my dad. I had to have my wedding, just like you're talking, my wedding without my father, right?
Yeah.
I get it. Like I remember sitting in graduation for high school and looking up into the bleachers and he's not there. And I saw another dad that kind of looked like him. And I was like, okay, he's here, you know, and like, it kind of helped me bring it together. But it really, when you think about the life that you made up in your head about what it's going to look like, somebody's not going to be there, you know?
Yeah.
And it just really makes you like completely have gratitude for all the moments we do have. And you're right. It shakes you like, at the end of life, what do I want to be remembered for? You know, someone's
Yeah.
writing my eulogy. What are they going to write? Aaron was here. Like that was it, you know? And so it's really about, I love that people like us, the thought leaders, the people that are making an impact, influencing changes in the world and really doing great things. We have to think about how much time we have to really affect as many people as we can with a positive message.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to think, oh man, I'm so grateful at 22 I learned this, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I learned it at, let's say, at least 15. Spoiler alert, my mom's still alive. She beat incurable cancer. However, I forgot that part. I always forget to tell people. I sit in there and I forget. Oh yeah, she's still alive. But that was another lesson, you know, about how the power of our mind and what we are able to create if we want to. You know, you can take a 12-month sentence and die on that 12-month mark, or you can do something completely radical and beat it all together, which really taught me so much more about life, that anything is possible. I don't see obstacles, because if we can beat incurable cancer, I'm sorry, there's nothing else. Like, there's nothing pretty much bigger than that you can really do. So I definitely believe in that. So now that you're, you know, coming up with these things, what is it? How are people working with you? What's like the thing that gets you super excited and passionate about every day and serving others? How are you doing that right now?
Yeah. I think it feeds into a little bit of what you were saying there, Aaron, in terms of being really intentional about how you're living your life. And ultimately, it sounds a bit morbid, but thinking of that last day and thinking, well, how do I want to evaluate my life and how do I want my life to have been defined? And so what I do with my company and my work, Author Your Life, is get people to really think about this story they want to write for themselves. And that's what I began on that day, as I started to write a different story for myself. I started to see myself as a different person within that story, started to think about how I wanted that story revolving around me, how I wanted to show up. And I use a lot of literary metaphors in my work. I talk about being the hero, about being the protagonist of your story, about going on a quest. That's your personal mission in life, thinking about the characters that you have in and around your life. And so that's what I really help people to do and to think of is, who do they want to be? what person are they capable of becoming? What do they want to do? What's their personal mission in life? What are they going to do with the time that they're gifted here on earth? And ultimately, again, feeding into a little bit of what you were saying, I think what makes life worth living is not what we do for ourselves, but what we do with other people and for other people. And I think this is something that we can get trapped in when we start talking about self-help, personal development. It's a focus on me, I, the self. And all this stuff is important, absolutely. But when you get to the end of your life, you're not going to be pleased with how much money you made or how many habits you put in, or even what time that you woke up in the morning, how many workouts you did. You're not going to be really happy with all of those personal things you did. What you're really going to look back on with joy and fulfillment and love is who you spent time with and what you did for those people. So the family that you had around you, the friendships that you fostered. And I think when we start talking about impact and meaning in life, I think that really comes from our contributions and our service. How many people were influenced by you? How many people were inspired by you? How many people are going to really miss you when you're gone and miss your presence and your influence on the earth? And these are things that I want people to realize and think about more with the work that I do for Your Life.
Well, I love it because I think that a lot of times people are confused. They don't know what they're supposed to, like, you can say, yeah, I might not be happy. I may be displeased with where my life is. Maybe I'm displeased with the work I'm doing. I know there's a call for something more. But how do you help people get the clarity, like you were talking about earlier, that you got some clarity from experts? How do you ask people who feel like that? Maybe they're numb, right? They're just like, I don't know. It's like, I'm doing the daily thing. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I get up and I commute to work and I go to work and then I come home and I'm with my family and blah, blah, blah. But they don't know what that something more is. And how do you help them kind of crack that open for them to kind of discover that for themselves?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a very difficult issue. And it's like, okay, I don't like the way that my life is going. I need clarity on what I'm doing. Clarity is not a magic pill. It's not an injection. I don't have this little gift wrapped clarity box and I just give it to you and there you go. There's your clarity in life. Now you know who you want to be, what you want to do. It's a process like anything else. And there's lots of different ways to look at this. I think clarity in terms of what you want to do, something that I really enjoy doing with people and I think is one of the best answers, is to go back to when you were very young. Think of who you were at 5 or 6 years old. And if you remember that time, I'm sure one day the teacher asked the class, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when you're that age, you give the most ridiculous answers. You say,
Dolphin trainer.
What were you?
Dolphin trainer.
Dolphin trainer, amazing. That's the type of answers I'm talking about. Yeah. Astronaut, dolphin trainer, rally driver, cowboy, princess. You get caught up by the fantastical and the extravagant and the flamboyant. Now, the purpose of exercise is not to go back and say, well, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 5 years old, so I better get going and do some space training. Well, by the time that you get to one of my seminars, you're too old to be an astronaut. There's a very clear path to being an astronaut, and if you're not on it from an early age, the opportunity's gone. You've lost it. So you're not going to be an astronaut. But what I want you to think of is why being an astronaut captured your fascination. Why, out of all the things, the dolphin trainers, the rally drivers, why was it the astronaut that you wanted to be? What activated something within you? What captured your fascination? What made you enthusiastic about being an astronaut? Was it the idea of exploring new frontiers? Was it the idea of freedom? Go back to the values and ideas behind why that captured your interest. And then we can think, okay, well, if freedom and exploring new frontiers is something that's really strong for you, you don't have to be an astronaut to do that. There's so many other callings and pursuits in life whereby you can activate those intrinsic deep values that you have for yourself. Because I think at that age, 5 years old, 6 years old, there's this buzzword that gets thrown around a lot nowadays, authentic. And it's a bit of a shame that authentic is becoming a cliche. Out of all the words that could possibly be a cliche, it is becoming a bit of a cliche. But I think going to the deep meaning and the good intention behind the word authentic, when you were 5 years old, you were your most authentic. You didn't have all these scripts. You didn't have all of this conditioning. You didn't have all these stories and narratives built up for who you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do in life. You're connected with the core essence of who you are, whatever words you want to put to that, the self, the soul, the heart, whatever words, spirit. If you can recapture some of that, then that begins to give you the answers of who you can be as an adult nowadays. And to give you an example from my personal life, my personal journey, when I asked myself that question, I go back to that time. I wanted to be an author because I was fascinated with stories. I loved having stories being read to me. I was actually reading before I could properly speak. When I played, I'd often create these alternate universes and realities and lose myself in them. So when I wanted to be a grown-up, what did I want to do when I grew up? I wanted to be an author. I wanted to write books. I wanted to be a part of creating stories. And fast forward with a bit of deviation and some realizations along the way, I am now an author. I've now written 4 books. I'm writing my 5th one at the moment. But I lost my way for a long time on that. It was only once I'd lost Dad and started reconsidering my life that I recognized life is too short to put off our dreams. And so I re-engaged with that childhood dream. I re-engaged with those childhood values and started to realign myself and reconnect myself with what I was supposed to be doing.
I love that. By the way, I was a dolphin trainer, so I did fulfill that.
Amazing.
I did want it. And well, at first I thought, okay, so the first word that came out was oceanographer, because I thought that meant taking pictures under the water. And that sounded really cool. But then later it kind of morphed into dolphin training. And I was going to college for marine biology. I went to do a internship, and they said, all you need is a psych degree or a teaching degree, because it's not about what's in the ocean. It's like all about training. And I thought, oh yeah, and behaviors. And I love people. So let's go for my psych degree. So that's literally, I went and got my psych degree, then went back to work at the Dolphin Research Center. And I was like, this is awesome, but $8.50 an hour doesn't pay my bills, especially in Key West. So I was working bartending at night and dolphin training the day. I like hardly got any sleep, and I was like, okay, this isn't what I wanted to do. And so it was fun to be able to do that. And it's still fun to go back. I take my kids to play with the dolphins, which is so much fun. But now it's like that kept me on my steps to uncovering like what I really wanted to do. And then I went to school to be a therapist, and I was like, oh, I can't sit here in my clinicals and go, yeah, these people don't want to change. So I was like, well, I don't want to do this either. So for me, it was just try it on, see what happens. If it doesn't work, do another thing, keep going. But as it went, now everything I teach about speaking is all through the lens of psychology and motivating people and getting them to transform their lives. So it's kind of fun because I was like, going to be a dolphin trainer. And I was, but only for a short time, because it didn't pay the bills. When reality hit, right? That whole magical part of being a dolphin trainer wasn't like being a mermaid sitting on a rock and calling them in and all your needs are met. No, there's reality to that. That's awesome. So I love to ask this question when people are, and this is fun for you, because when I get asked, I want to speak, but I don't know what my story is. I don't know what I should be talking about. And I always ask him this question. So I'm going to ask you this question. Okay. If I gave you a stage for 1 hour, you had 1 million people in the audience, and after you were done on stage, you would literally walk off and be dead. So this is your last 1 hour. What do you want to impart in the world? What is that message?
Man, that is a lot of pressure, isn't it?
Gets you really narrow focused, doesn't it? If you have 1 hour and that's it.
I think I'd have to be talking about purpose and aspiration. I think we've got a horrible, I won't say epidemic, that's slightly too strong a word, but this mentality in our society where we hide our dreams and hide our ambitions. And actually, this is something that I admire you guys in the States for, because you are a lot less closed about this type of stuff. You're a lot more ambitious and aspirational than we are across here in the UK. Where here in the UK, it's a lot more stunted and it's a lot more reserved, and I think that's a real shame. I don't think that's how we as humans should live. I think each of us is born for this unique and vital role in the makeup of our world and our society. And you have to go out there and make that happen. You have to go out there and fulfill your purpose and fulfill your potential. And so I think that last hour would be all about awakening the aspiration in people and recognizing that ambition and aspiration are not dirty words. They're actually how we get shit done in the world. If you look at Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, if you look at all these people that we put up on a pedestal, what they were working on, their dreams were so large, they were terrifying. They were working on things that literally had never happened, that they didn't know whether it was possible to make it a reality. But they didn't let the size of those dreams stop them from working towards them and trying to fulfill their aspirations. I know in particular of those Martin Luther King, he really struggled with this idea of being worthy and being good enough to, he was very much thrust into this role as ambassador and figurehead for the civil rights movement. And he questioned every single day, am I good enough to do this? Am I the right person? He would get on his knees and he would pray to God again and again and again. Please, God, give me the strength to take on this task. Give me the strength to take on this role. Because he didn't know whether he could do it. But he didn't let that fear and that doubt stop him from making it happen. I think that so many people let their fears, their doubts, their insecurities stop them from doing what they're really supposed to do. You were talking a little bit earlier about how people are kind of asleep and they're in this inertia of just going through the motions and working in that same old job and being stuck in that same old relationship and living that same old lifestyle. And they're not really questioning, is this what I'm capable of? Is this what I'm meant to do in the world? And so that last speech for the hour that I have, I'll just be trying to drill in this message of don't be scared of your aspirations. You have these aspirations for a reason because you're capable of reaching them, but you've got to do in the work and you've got to get out of your own goddamn way in order to make it happen.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it doesn't matter how high up you go in your success, you're always going to be questioning it because it's pushing you to the next level and it's pushing you to the next level and the next level. Because as I up level, people look at me and go, oh, you just have all your stuff together. You've done so much work on yourself. You're already successful. I see all these amazing things you're doing. And I say to them, I'm at the same level you are. It's just in a different way. I might have hit a worthiness and I was like, yes, I feel totally worthy. And then I push myself to something bigger and it's like, oh, am I capable of this? Right. And so if you are growing and you're doing bigger and bigger things, that's going to come up for you every day or at least a couple times a week if you really are the one to do this. And I think that's normal, but I think a lot of people aren't talking about that that's normal. You don't see people, some of the biggest speakers in the world that are out there doing this thing. I struggle every day to get myself motivated I struggle every day to am I enough? Is this enough? If I put this product out, is it enough? Will people buy it? We all have that, but a lot of people just keep it to themselves because they're still striving to the next thing and not thinking, you know what? There are some people behind me that could really use this story right now. And every time I have a challenge in my life, I go, ooh, this story is for someone else. I got to get through it. It's great for me now. But as I get through it, I get to share it from the people behind me that are coming, and if I look at life that way, that these obstacles or fears that get in the way, I'm like, yeah, I can't stop because if I listen to the fear, I can't serve those people behind me that are waiting for me to get there, right? And so I always know that everything happens for a reason and that as those things come up, I'm just learning so that I can show other people. Mm-hmm. You're crafting the next chapter, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So tell me, what are the books? Tell me about your books because I don't know all your books. So tell us which each one is and what you're currently working on now.
Okay, cool. So I started out whilst I was still at university, I started writing novels, and it was fiction that I kind of really thought was my path and where I wanted to go with writing books. So I wrote a couple of crime thrillers while I was at university, and to be honest, I actually very rarely talk about them and really promote them anymore, because I'll be honest with you, they're not that good compared to what I can do now. Certainly, it's, you know, the first iteration of something is, you should, I can't remember who said it, there's some kind of quote like, if you're not ashamed of the first thing that you create, you haven't tried hard enough, or something along those lines. So I don't really talk about those books anymore, but they were so important and so key for teaching me about the writing process in terms of how you get into a writing flow, how you build up consistency and momentum for yourself. So I'm very grateful to them in that respect, not necessarily as creations that help people and serve the world. The first book that I'm really sort of pleased with and sort of actively promote and get into the hands of readers is The Last 60 Minutes. So The Last 60 Minutes is all about the story of losing my dad. It's about those last 60 minutes that I spent in that hospice room with him. And as I started to reflect on this process in the first few months of the grieving and bereavement process, I started to realize that I'd learned some fundamental truths about myself and about my life in those last 60 minutes. And in particular, when I had that final conversation with Dad, there was these three things that I said to him. I said, I'm grateful for the fantastic job you did of raising me. I'm incredibly proud to be your son. I love you, Dad. Now, when push came to shove and I'm sitting there and I know what's going to happen, I know this is the last time I'm going to speak to my dad, I know this is the final opportunity to say what I really want to say to him. Why do I say those three things? Out of anything that I could have said to him, why did those three statements come to the forefront? And so I recognized that those three statements represented three fundamental truths about myself, about my life, about the way that my life was ultimately going to go and to develop. So these three statements formed three lessons: gratitude, identity, and love. And that's what The Last 60 Minutes talks about. It talks about these principles and how I started to adopt them more into my life, habits, practices, techniques that I use to develop them more. And ultimately, that was kind of the foundation of my initial change and my initial kind of growth from that experience of losing Dad. So that's The Last 60 Minutes. And then my most recent book is Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story. And that's very much my flagship book for what I'm doing now. And that's really thinking about this process of changing your story. Because I walked out of that hospice room and I said, I'm starting a new chapter of my life. I'm going to be a new person. I'm going to do different things. And for people listening, and I'm sure you'll know yourself as well, Aaron, just because you make this decision that I'm going to change, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to become this, and I'm going to build this habit and do this practice, doesn't mean that anything actually changes. And this is exactly what I found. I made this decision that I wanted to change, and nothing flipping happened. I was still the same person. I was still held back by my fears, my insecurities. I was frustrated, resentful. I wasn't making the progress I wanted to make. I still didn't feel I was making a difference to anyone's lives or helping them or impacting them. So Author Your Life was really an effort to give me the tools, the knowledge that I wish I'd had at that age, and to be able to chart that journey of how do you start from that very first moment of deciding you want to start a new chapter of your life, be a different person, do different things, have more of an impact and meaning in the lives of other people. And so to give a step-by-step process that I wish I'd had to people who are in the same situation, people who've just had a health scare, people who've just been fired from their job, people who've just broke up from a long-term relationship, whatever that catalyst of change might be, showing them, well, here's a step-by-step process of how you make that happen. So that's my most recent book, Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story. And then the book that I'm writing just now is about public speaking, and very specifically how to really get into public speaking, and from the process of being a motivational speaker, inspirational speaker, professional speaker. How do you start running your own events? How do you start bringing together your story, your message, your teaching? How do you present that to an audience? How do you run an event? Going down to things like how do you book a room and what to write in your marketing and all that kind of stuff. again, it's funny how so much of our kind of work and our teaching comes up of solving our own problems. So for me, when I made this decision that I wanted to be a speaker and that was the way I was going to make my impact and make my difference in the world, well, I wish I'd had this flipping book when I first started, so I didn't make all the mistakes that I made at the beginning. So that's what we're working on right now. The working title is Rise and Inspire. I think that probably will be the final title with some kind of subtitle that I haven't yet decided on. That's my current book that'll be coming out next year at some point. I've still got to work out finalizing a date on that one. But that's coming soon. I've got a couple more ideas swimming around my head. When you're a creative person, there's always more in your head than you can put out into the world. So I'm endeavoring to write another 2 books before I'm 30. So I'm 26 at the moment. So if I can crank out a couple books in a couple of years, then I'll hit that target.
Yeah. And you get to be the author that you said you like, that's what you wanted to be. So
yeah.
I love it. Well, I love that what you're talking about in telling your story is thinking about it from different angles. The 2 things that I remember most is when I did some work with Don Miguel Ruiz from the 4 Agreements.
Yeah.
Talked about walking into a movie theater, and the first door, number 1, you open, you go in, you sit down, and you watch your life play out from your viewpoint, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're watching this like, oh yeah, this is me. Oh yeah, this is what's happened. Yes, this is exactly what happened. It was my depiction, everything. Then you get bored, you walk out and you go to door number 2. Door number 2 maybe comes from your mother's perspective of your whole life, right? And seeing everything unfold and all your interactions and all the things that happen between you 2, but from her perspective. And then you go into the next door and you just start seeing how everyone sees the same circumstances differently. Yeah. And what is created from those things, right? So you get this really deep perspective on, kind of like if your life flashed in front of your eyes from your perspective and then everyone else's perspective, like, wow, because it's interesting how other people see us, right? We see ourselves in such a different way. And I think sometimes I would love to borrow the way that people see me and just adopt that and sit in it for a little while. And so I actually collect a book of like nice things that people have said, little testimonials, anything that people have given me that say, how much I meant to them or whatever. And it's my rainy day box for those days where I'm like, am I really making an impact? And should I still do this, right? All those fears come up. I just open it and I read through and it makes me feel better because I'm like, oh, you know what? It does make a difference. And then the other work was with Bo Eason about writing your story. Did you ever attend Bo's event?
No, I haven't been to great speaker training yet. It's on my target list, my ambitions.
I have a feeling it's no longer going to be running. We'll see. I'm officially taking it over in a way. No.
What?
So unofficially, I was working with Roger and Bo, and they both said that Brendan was kind of getting rid of it, and he brought it down to 1 day at the end of Experts Academy last year. But I have a feeling it's not going to come back. Because I wanted to be the female speaker on that panel because there wasn't really a woman representing, and most of the room was women. So I was like, we need a woman up there. And Bo was like, yes, I think that'd be great. Let's talk to him. But I think he's stopping doing it. Bo was going to speak at my event, but he has his book launch coming up, and Tony Robbins' team called, and I'm not quite Tony Robbins yet.
Can't compete, can you?
Yet. But we're talking about continuing to do that and because I'd love to bring Bo and Roger on the stage and do that. But one of the things that Bo has you do when you write out your story is you first write it from your perspective, and then you write it from the other person's perspective. So let's say the protagonist, right? The person that's all, like I think about when my mom, so the story came out for me was when my mom told me she had cancer. And I started writing it from my perspective and like getting up from my chair and going down to the office and not understanding why someone's coming to me at school. What did I do wrong? And then I see my mom standing there with the same look on her face that when she told me my dad was dead. And so I knew something shifted and changed for me. But when I wrote it from her perspective, I'm 39 years old. I'm not going to make it to 40. And how dare I tell my child who already experienced the loss of her father that I have a year to live? How do I rob her of her childhood again? Like, and just tears coming down my face, like thinking about it, because now I have kids. What would that feel like to be on the other side of that? And it really made writing my speech about it so much more in depth, because you get the different vantage points, right? When you can write it from these other angles and see it, then you go, wow, there's some really cool stuff in here. Because when you watch a movie, it's not one dude walking around telling you about their life. It's not a monologue. There's other characters and people's, what happens, the chain reactions. If you have a conversation with this person, what happens? And so seeing it from those different perspectives really gave me a deeper look into my own stories. So I love that you kind of layer that in there about, looking at those different things, because we can write our story in the only way we want. But if we are total narcissists and it's all about us and our story is all there, there's like, no one's going to be around for that. Nobody wants to hear it either. It's got to be about contribution and giving back and really sharing that message that you learned during that difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes say to people, have you ever read a book that had one character, or watched a film that had one character? No, of course you haven't, because it'd be the most boring thing in the world. Can you imagine if Harry Potter was just a monologue of Harry sitting in his cupboard under the stairs, wondering about life? Nobody would read that stuff. It's the other characters that make the story interesting and engaging.
Yeah. And you always fight for the hero. You always are on the underdogs team. You're always on that person that you want them to win. You want them to win so badly that you're experiencing all the same things that they are, even though they're on a screen or in a book. Yeah. And I just love that. I love that. And the other thing he says is one of my favorite things. He said, Bo said, think about your five best favorite movies of all time. So I wrote out Star Wars. I wrote out, what is it? Field of Dreams, because I think about playing baseball with my dad. And I said G.I. Jane and Rudy. And he's like, what's the common theme? And I was like, the underdog. And that's so my life's theme. Always being the underdog and overcoming all the obstacles to get to the thing and to make it happen. And it always happens, but it's all through the struggle and all this stuff. And it was like, oh my gosh, it is so what we look for. We're looking for ourselves in the characters, just as our audience, when speaking, is looking to us and finding the ways that we are the same. And if you tell your story in the right way, you can get them into their story, and now you're connected. So I love that. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Okay, so where can people find out more about you? How can they get, your books? Tell us how people can get in contact with you.
Awesome. Just before I do, I've got something here you might like, Erin.
Yes, please.
What you were saying earlier. The audio listeners obviously won't be able to appreciate this, but the visual folks will, just when you were talking about Star Wars earlier. But back to your question.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope.
Back to where can you find me? So my website is authoryourlife.org, because domains are hard to get nowadays, and someone has taken .com, and they don't even have the decency to have a website up. They've just got the domain and there's nothing there. If you're going to steal my domain name, at least put something decent up. So it's .org rather than .com. You can find me on all the socials, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram are my main ones. And there it's David McCrae, Author Your Life. Instagram is @just Author Your Life. The other two are David McCrae. Make sure you spell McCrae right. There's about 6 ways to spell it, and everyone chooses one of the other 5 instead of mine. So check the title on this podcast. It's MCC. That's 2 C's, RAE. And in terms of my books, you can find them on Amazon, ebook, paperback, audiobook, narrated by yours truly. So whatever form you digest your books in, it's there for you. And you can type in the last 60 minutes, David McCrae, and that will pop up. And you can type in Author Your Life, David McCrae, and that will pop up for you as well, all on Amazon.
I love it. Well, I'll have the links definitely in the show notes so that everyone can find that. And my favorite question I ask all of my guests is, and it's something so perfect for you because it lines so up with what you do. I talk about borrowing the confidence from my future self. My future self, I name her ELJ. She's got a $40 million company. She's got a New York Times bestselling book. She's got a TV show. She runs huge events around the world. She really has been making a huge impact and just really, giving back in big ways. So when I need advice, I bring her into my office and she sits on the other side of my desk and I ask her, because she's already been through all this stuff, right? She's laughing at the struggles I'm going through because she's like, oh, just wait till this is over. You're going to realize what was the amazing part of it, right? The light at the end of the tunnel. But right now you're really in it. But I always ask her advice. So if your future self was to come here and sit with you today, what would he tell you?
Is a good question. I think, so I have a personality trait and aspect to myself, and it's simultaneously my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. I'm a hugely self-sufficient, driven person. Like when I want to do something, I just do it. If I want to go across to California and go to Experts Academy, I throw down $2,000 for a ticket and I just do it. If I want to write a book, I sit down and I make it happen. If I want to be a speaker, I rent out a room and start speaking to people. Like whatever I've done in my life, I've always just said, I'm going to do it and I make it happen. It's my greatest strength and it's my greatest weakness, because I get frustrated and impatient at my progress. No matter how well I'm doing, I always feel I can do better. I always feel that I can push on. Because I have such high expectations of myself and aspirations of myself, I don't ask people for help. And when I'm struggling and when things aren't going my way and I'm finding things tough, I feel like I need to overcome this. I need to do this. I need to develop. I need to be good enough here. So I think my older self, in his great wisdom and knowing a lot more than I do right now, would say, like, David, stop being such an instant gratification millennial. Not everything happens with the click of a button. You have so much time on your hands. You're still young. You've done so much already. Stop putting so much pressure on yourself. Stop thinking that you need to know the answers to everything. Take your drive, but channel it. And if you keep on taking your drive and channeling it as you know that you can, you are going to get to where you want to go. So take some time to enjoy yourself a little bit more along the journey. Take some time to take the pressure off yourself and don't be too hard on yourself. And also don't be scared to ask for help, because it's going to help you to overcome these challenges. And, we've been talking about stories throughout. Harry Potter didn't do things by himself. Luke Skywalker didn't do things by himself. Frodo Baggins didn't do things by himself. They all had this huge array of friends, of mentors, of teachers and supporters who guided them through their personal quests. And if anything, those heroes, they weren't the most skilled or the strongest or the most courageous of those characters, but they pooled the resources of everyone who was helping them. And that ultimately allowed them to be that central figure, be that protagonist that we ultimately came to love and support so much. So that's what my older self would be telling me, is embrace the heroic qualities of actually recognizing there's people who can help you and to allow them to help you along your journey.
Well, and I think that as people who serve others, it's really easy for us to serve. And all these people are like loving us because we've given to them and changed their lives and all these things. And it's doing them a disservice if we never ask for help back. Mm-hmm. Because they want so badly to give back in the way that we gave to them, that they would do anything for us. And we just ignore them, like, oh, it's okay. I can do this alone. I got it, this. And I think there's something to be said about, if you don't receive from the people that you've really shifted and changed, then what are you doing? And I think about it, is it like it's not your intentions, but like if you're doing it and never ask, then you're just doing that to fulfill yourself and just to make yourself feel like the bigger person. Because, I changed lives. Yeah, but no one had the opportunity to help you change yours or help facilitate in a bigger way. Like, Yeah. Boring story. No, thank you. Well, thank you so much. I learned so much. I swear, every time I ask that question, I really listen as if it's my future self coming to me and listen. I'm like, oh man, you spoke to me too. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I need a team too. And I know that. And when you're in it, sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
And I get it. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate everything that you're doing to change the world. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. And we will see you on stage.